The snow fell like whispers from heaven that night, soft, endless, and merciless. It blanketed the small mountain town until it seemed the world itself had been erased, replaced by white silence and the faint hum of the wind. Roads vanished. Streetlights flickered like dying candles. The world was asleep, or perhaps hiding, from the cold, from the storm, from life itself. But one light still burned at the edge of town, behind a leaning picket fence. A little house glowed softly against the storm. Inside, an old woman named Margaret sat by the fire, knitting quietly. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age or cold, but from something deeper, loneliness. The kind that seeps into your bones when you've lived too long without someone to talk to. Her husband had passed years ago, her children were far away, and though the fire crackled warmly, the silence around her felt louder than thunder. Outside, the storm roared on, blind and brutal. Somewhere out there, someone must be fighting for their life tonight, Margaret thought. So she closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer into the storm. Please, Lord, keep them warm. She didn't know it yet, but that one small prayer, whispered in solitude, was about to echo through the night and return to her in a way she could never have imagined. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't come as an answer from heaven. Sometimes, it comes roaring down the road on two wheels. The knock came suddenly, a loud, desperate pounding that shook the old wooden door. Margaret jumped, her knitting falling into her lap. Who could possibly be out in this storm? Heart pounding, she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and shuffled toward the sound. The wind howled as she unlatched the door, and when it swung open, her breath caught in her throat. 15 men stood there, massive, leather-clad, their jackets marked with the infamous skull-wing insignia of the Hells Angels. Their faces were red from the cold, beards crusted with snow and ice. Behind them, their motorcycles were half buried, chrome turned ghostly white. For a moment, neither side moved. The storm screamed between them. Margaret could feel fear crawling up her spine. These were men most people would avoid. Outlaws, rough riders, the kind mothers warned their sons about. But then she saw it. Their hands, trembling, their lips, blue, their eyes, pleading. Whatever stories the world told about them, tonight they weren't devils. They were just humans, freezing in the dark. Margaret stepped aside. Come in, she said softly, before you freeze to death. The men looked at one another, unsure if they'd heard her right. Then one nodded, and they stepped inside, filling the tiny house with the smell of wet leather, cold metal, and desperation. Margaret's little living room seemed to shrink around them. The fire flickered weakly, as if intimidated by the size of her guests. Without a word, she hurried to the kitchen. She found bread, soup, a bit of leftover stew. It wasn't much, but she worked quickly, her wrinkled hands moving with purpose. Soon, the small room filled with the comforting aroma of hot food. The bikers sat awkwardly, their massive frames hunched on floral chairs and delicate couches that looked ready to collapse under their weight. No one spoke at first. They weren't used to kindness, especially not from someone like her. Finally, one of them, tall, gray-eyed, his beard streaked with silver, cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said gruffly, you sure you want us in here? Most folks would have slammed the door. Margaret smiled faintly. Most folks forget what it's like to be cold, she said, handing him a bowl of soup. Eat. Something shifted then. The storm outside howled, but inside, a fragile warmth began to grow. Laughter followed soon after, deep, rumbling, awkward laughter that filled the tiny house until even the wind seemed to quiet down. One by one, the bikers fell asleep by the fire, wrapped in quilts that smelled faintly of lavender. Margaret watched them from her chair, her heart full. She had never had sons, but tonight, she felt as if she had 15. By dawn, the storm had passed. The snow outside sparkled like glass beneath the pale morning sun. The men thanked her in voices gruff but sincere. Before they left, their leader turned back and said, Ma'am, you'll never be forgotten. Margaret simply smiled. Ride safe. Then they were gone, engines rumbling into the distance until silence claimed the town once more. She thought that was the end of it, just a strange, beautiful story she'd tell no one but her fire. But kindness, like a seed, doesn't die. It grows, quietly, invisibly, until the day it blooms. The next morning, Margaret was feeding the birds when she heard a distant roar. At first, she thought it was thunder. But then the sound grew. Deep, rolling, unstoppable. The ground trembled beneath her boots. She turned toward the road and froze. Down the long white lane came motorcycles. Not 15 this time, hundreds. An endless procession of chrome and leather, stretching farther than her eyes could see. They lined the street on both sides, the engines humming like a living heartbeat. Her neighbors watched from their windows, terrified. But Margaret stood still, her hands pressed over her heart. The tall leader dismounted and walked toward her, snow crunching under his boots. In his hand, he held a bouquet of flowers, fresh flowers, bright and impossible in the dead of winter. He smiled. "Told the brothers what you did for us," he said. "Word spread. You gave us warmth when no one else would. We don't forget that." Behind him, the bikers unloaded bags of groceries, boxes of firewood, warm clothes, and tools. They fixed her fence, shoveled her driveway, even oiled the squeaky hinge on her porch. The air filled with laughter, music, and life. For the first time in years, Margaret's little house felt alive. When they were done, the leader stood at her door again. "If you ever need anything," he said, "you've got family now, family on two wheels." Then, with a thunderous roar, they rode off, disappearing into the horizon as sunlight broke through the clouds. Margaret stood on her porch, tears glistening in her eyes. The world was quiet again, but her heart was louder than ever. That night, as she sat by the fire, she whispered the same prayer she had before, but this time, not for others. This time, it was a thank you, because she had finally learned the secret of kindness. When you give without expectation, the universe always finds its way back to your door.